But seriously, Hugo, I think to start off with, an internet speed 1 billion times greater than what we have now, leading to a sort of democratic utopia in 40 years' time. My cynical side would immediately say, oh, 1 billion times faster internet is going to be a lot of porn. Because let's face it, if you look at something like Second Life, those people do not walk around Second Life having Socratian dialogues, do they? It is all, for anyone who's been in Second Life, who knows what Second Life is, right? Those people in there, it's the miniskirts don't exist. I mean, the fashions are just, the guys are all Dungeons and Dragons with tribal tattoos. It is satiating, of course, a primal instinct in people, and they hide behind the anonymity that the internet provides for them to release a sort of innate primal desire to live in a primal, simple world. And this whole idea of us walking around in spandex with big heads, not going to happen. I don't think so. Anyway, but that's not what I want to talk about tonight. My talk tonight is going to be about arrogance. Arrogance, and it's not the personal kind of arrogance. A lot of people think I'm arrogant because I walk along the street and I'll say hello and I don't talk to them. And the answer is because I don't really hear them. Now that can be really useful at times, but most of the time the consequence is everyone just thinks that I personally am arrogant. That's not the kind of arrogance I'm going to talk about though. How many people here have done computer programming? All right, most of it. So you'll all relate to what I'm about to say. All right, I've done a lot of programming over the years. When you write code, you'll do a block of code and you'll look at it. It won't be many lines long, and you'll think to yourself, yes, that's a nice little elegant little thing that I've put together there. You compile it and syntax error. Sure as God made little apples, you're going to have at least one syntax error, probably more. You'll fix the syntax error. You'll compile it again, you'll have other syntax errors, or you'll have some logic errors. It just won't do what you want it to do. And of course, computers are very good like that. They'll do exactly what you tell them to do, which is not necessarily what you want them to do. So you look at this code and you think, oh, what's wrong with it? And you'll suddenly realize, you'll have a blinding flash, an inspiration, that what's wrong? And you will fix it. And you'll run the code again. And once again, it will fail for some reason. Now, who's had that experience? Multiple times. You go in there, you write your code, you look at it, you know, you have a blinding sense of the obvious, why it's working or why it wasn't working before. You fix that, and yet it still does not work. And what this does is it teaches you not to trust yourself, not to trust your own belief. And I think programming should be mandatory for that very simple lesson that it gives to all of us. It teaches us that our idea of what is right and wrong at any time itself may be wrong. Our very belief may be wrong. It calls into question ideology. It calls into question all of those things which, when we look at the world around us, when we look at the debates on television, we see this constant battle of ideologies, people believing one thing over another. And I look at those people, and then I look back at my blocks of code, and I think, oh, I don't know what's right. I know what I think's right, I'll work on probability, but I don't necessarily trust anything I see, other than looking back through history. Now I'm going to feed into what Tim had brought up, I think very important, and where arrogance possibly still applies to all of us. Tim mentioned in one point in his talk quite correctly that in the past there have been technological innovations that have caused mass unemployment. And of course the most salient one is the Industrial Revolution, which is arguably still ongoing. The Industrial Revolution cut a massive swath through the agrarian society that existed at the time, as machines, which were vastly more efficient, displaced enormous amounts of labour in the countryside, and those people all wandered off into the cities and did whatever they could. And initially it was not pretty that the You had young kids working in coal mines because they were short. You had lots of people working long hours in factories because their intellectual capabilities coupled with their dexterity gave them a job to do. But in the long term, it created the economic posterity and the boom that we now see around us. But this time it's different. This time, the thing that is being assaulted is not human muscles, which were replaced by steam engines. It's now the human mind. And I put it to you that there's nowhere else to go. There is no cities for us to run off to where we can now use another talent or another skill to overcome this displacement that we've suffered, this loss of status, as we also means, that we've suffered at the hands of our technology. There is nowhere else to go. That this coming revolution is going to be so profound, so enormous in scope. It is something that we need to be addressing now, hence things like this conference and the discussions that we are having tonight. And this is where the arrogance comes in. The next wave of artificial intelligence is going to be targeting our society. It's going to be displacing initially thousands of people, then hundreds and thousands, then millions of people. And it's already here and it's already happening. The arrogance is this. That is, we have many people go to universities like ourselves, we do our courses, we come out, we read books on this subject, we think about the unemployment, and we all automatically assume that the unemployment is going to eat up the pyramid from the bottom. That all those people in the menial jobs are the ones who are going to go first. Well, we're wrong. Simply because our salaries as intellectual workers are so much higher, the AI systems are targeted at that group. We are the targets for the AI systems. The people in middle management, upper management, who are working in technology, they are the targets. They're the ones that are going to lose their jobs first. And technology is then going to eat itself down. As technology fused with robotics is going to start to increasingly provide worker replacements in factories, and that won't be for some time, but it will happen, and possibly up, until all you're left is the top strata that do nothing but own land, and working all the way down until the last profession is probably going to be the first profession, which is prostitution. And that's the end of my flash talk. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Play devil's advocate. We have to get to that level, right? The machines have to get to be intelligent. And during the getting, then I think the old model of the dumber ones getting replaced first, that's realistic until the machines are at human, smart human level. But we have to get to that level, and that will still take decades, won't it?
All right. Well,
so you sort of.
I think in some areas computers are already as smart as us. If you go into Goldman Sachs, they've got banks of computers working on share trading analysis and various other things. Now those computers regularly outperform humans in a very narrow field. In my own work, I developed back in the 80s some economic modeling systems, and those systems basically copied economists. The economists would sit down at a computer, they'd look at the various industry groups, they would do life cycle analysis, they would look at all the risk factors, they would then make an assessment, risk loan officer systems for banks, and the system would then learn to do what those economists did. Now those systems were done using about 256 neurons. Right? Vastly smaller number of neurons is in the human brain. And the reason, of course, that we're able to do that is because humans do a lot more than economics. Humans take the rubbish out. Humans walk the dog. Humans talk to each other about things other than economics, unless you're an economist, which seems to be all they ever talked about. But in certain subdomains, we have already passed human intelligence. That is, if you look at flying an aircraft, I would suggest to you that computers are now better at flying a plane under most circumstances, but not all, than human pilots. In fact, you'll find about 1 in 30 landings today are done by computers, that they mandatorily test the landing system of the aircraft and will let the computer land the plane. That these narrow bands of computer dominance are going to get broader, and they will merge together, and in so doing you'll see the formulation of artificial general intelligence as we know it. But my point is this: the jobs that we do are by their nature specialized. That's why we call them jobs. I do this and I give it a label, and that job's very specialization means it is vulnerable to a non-AGI, a non-artificially general intelligent computer. And so I see that we don't need to have general intelligence before we see this swath cut through society. It's going to happen, and it's already happening. The first profession that was ever replaced by a computer, does anyone know what it is? The first profession that was replaced by a computer was a computer. A computer was a person whose job it was to work out ephemeris tables and things of that nature. In fact, the computers did such a good job at decimating that profession that they took the name. Now they're going to be doing other things too. There'll be accountants, there'll be hopefully lawyers very soon. There'll be, so I think, whilst I agree that artificial general intelligence is a long way off, one of the reasons it's a long way off is because there's no need necessarily to create it, other than there's an academically interesting thing to do. The reason is, there's no, other than a theoretically interesting thing to do, the things that we want to replace are the doctors, because they make lots of money, or the lawyers, they make lots of money. I don't need to replace my wife. I'm not married, by the way. I don't need to replace my wife or my dog even. I don't need to replace those, because they're not expensive to create. They are fun to have around. But I do want to replace lawyers. Right? I do want to replace well, not necessarily doctors, certainly not nurses. I do want to replace many of the professions that we see out there with systems that are more reliable. So I see that ultimately what we're going to see is an increase in specialized intelligence, which will get better and better, and as those systems fuse together, then we'll start to see the formation of artificial and general intelligence. Anyway, any other questions?
Would you vote for...
I'll take 2 more questions. Yes, please speak up.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like you're somewhat skeptical on visuospatial like food preparation and that being replaced by AI, or is it just...
No, my skepticism, all right, my skepticism is not, it's not technical. I do believe that we will develop the technologies to allow us to do that. My skepticism about it happening in the short term is economic, that it does not cost much money to have a human being in that situation. Whereas to make a robot into that situation currently costs a lot more. Now in some cases, because they work 24 hours, they never sleep, they never complain, they never get sick, they can be justified. And certainly the car manufacturing industry is one of those. But it's going to be some time, 10, 15 years probably, before we start to see, I believe, computers that have the visual acuity coupled with the dexterity that we have in a robotic form that can do things. Although, that said, of course, there's always the left field. People have already talked about 3D printers. Now, they are coming on stream. I've got some samples which I'll show at the conference on Saturday of the sort of output you can now get from 3D printers, which is quite impressive and will get better. And that could replace manual labour for the manufacture of those short items. So I'm not discounting left field, and my cynicism, it's just what I think economic reality that it will slow that one down. Next question, last question. Thank you very much.
Wait. Would you vote for an AI Prime Minister?
Absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. I do not think that we will. I think democracy, whilst it is excellent now, relies on an informed population, a relatively equally informed population. I mean, let's look at it. Democracy is a distributed sampling system, isn't it? It's a search engine. It's the ability to find a correct solution amongst possible solutions by having lots of brains working on a project, on a proposal, on a problem. And then hopefully that the answer will bubble to the surface and you'll vote for the good guys. You'll vote for the right people. It's a distributed search mechanism. But I do not believe it will work where you have a vast information and cognitive disparity that you will have as these systems get better. So I think we'll start to increasingly rely on these systems. And that is not democracy, but at the same time it's probably undefined in terms of the current political spectrum. I am, however, a little bit discordant with Tim in that I believe it is possible to have friendly AI. And my answer to that is friendly AI can exist simply by intuiting it with altruism, that it can be empathic to us. If we can understand the mechanisms of consciousness, which we now do not, if we can understand the mechanisms of empathy, which relates closely to consciousness, then there seems to be no reason why we can't build a machine that's empathic to us and thus wants and gains pleasure from our happiness, past and future, and thus would be seen to be a friendly AI. So I'm a bit optimistic in that respect. Thank you very much.